Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to The Holistic Alternative. I am Ann Mejia. It's wonderful to have you with us today. Our guest joining us is a true pioneer in the hemp and cannabis industry. He has been instrumental in shaping key legislation and leads two impactful organizations, Deschedule Earth and the Food First Initiative, which is dedicated to sustainable agricultural practices. We're absolutely thrilled to have him with us today. So please join me in welcoming Jason Lauve to the show. Jason, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate being here and thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. It's an honor and a privilege. And let's get right into it, my friend. If you wouldn't mind sharing with guests today that are watching a little bit about how you got involved with both the hemp and cannabis industry and maybe some of your personalized experience with it.
That's a big question. I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. I've always been a supporter of cannabis, and I used to smoke a little bit here and there in high school. And unfortunately, one year I was volunteering for a ski program in Colorado. I used to teach skiing to disabled people, and I got hit by somebody. Basically, he hit me in the back with his ski equipment. Basically fractured 3 vertebrae, broke 2 ribs, and a tear in my spinal cord. And that opened the door to obviously being disabled, but also to learning about plant medicine and specifically about cannabis. Now, fortunately, I guess you could say fortunately, I was in Colorado at the time, and I was surrounded by amazing researchers, scientists, growers, cannabis activists. And so that's where all this started.
Excellent. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think, like so many people, you, myself, and others included, a lot of people look for a more holistic and naturalized approach to healing.
Yeah, this is a big one. So I was just, kind of going with the system itself, the medical system. And initially, when I was brought into the hospital, a whole bunch of really strange things happened. And there's many stories that kind of fit within this big story. But in the long run, they put me on opiates. I was on opiates for over 11 years. And that's oxycodone, tramadol. I mean, the list goes on. Many of you who've been in that world understand. And if you don't and have never had that experience, I think opiates really shouldn't be used the way they are. Fortunately, cannabis is something that I found that made a big difference for me and didn't give me the psychological problems and physical problems that the opiates did. And so I feel very fortunate these days to have been through that process. It was a learning process. In the beginning, I was taking about 1 gram to 2 grams of full extract cannabis oil, or RSO, Rick Simpson oil, and floating in a hot tub and just trying to deal with the pain levels that I had. And fortunately, cannabis really did make a big difference for me.
No,
and
that's
so
wonderful.
Today, just to kind of jump ahead real quick, I'm actually walking these days. So I was using a wheelchair for over 11 years. I walked with 2 canes, short distances, or a walker. But now I'm free and clear of the wheels, don't use a cane, and I really don't have any pain anymore because I found a solution. It's not just taking a pill, it really is a lifestyle change that I found, that it wasn't that difficult. It was actually pretty easy to find. And that involves nutrition, it involves just the way I think, visualization techniques, and of course, cannabis as a plant, as a medicinal plant. I also do formulations, and so in this case for me, I found that when I discovered how to formulate a whole plant CBN product, that really made a difference for me, a huge difference in my progression.
That's great. And thank you so much for sharing that. It's difficult when, the system is designed to only treat with
Mm,
opiates. They don't use any naturalized approach. And again, oftentimes, like you stated, and I've experienced personally, like it creates more harm than good for other
yeah,
facets of the human body. So that's great that
yeah.
you were able to kind of negate, those systematic approaches from broken system essentially. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm glad that you're doing well and that you're walking again and able to help society, with your story.
One of the things that I just want to mention about the opiates thing, for those people who've never experienced opiates or don't know what they really are, what they do to your body, they have a heavy toll. They pay a heavy toll on how we think, our emotions, and so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, the opiates and my use of them, even though they were prescribed to me, I've lost a lot of friends and a lot of family connections because of it. When I was on opiates, it changed me. It wasn't who I really was. And so that's something I also look back at in regards to working with a lot of people that I do today, clients and other people, that I have to acknowledge the other damages that happen, not just physical. And I think it's important to talk about because a lot of people know people that take opioids and don't necessarily understand that maybe they're angry or frustrated because of the opiates versus their normal behavior.
No, I couldn't agree more with that sentiment because, again, personally speaking, I didn't know who I was on the opiates. They were not
Yeah.
me. They definitely affect your mood. It was like a black, dark cloud was always hanging over me. So, again, thank you for sharing that. That is a very crucial piece of, opiate use that people don't talk about or they're not aware of. So, I think it's important to discuss.
Yeah.
And
These
thank you for
things,
sharing.
these are really, really important. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate that. That's a big deal to me, actually.
Absolutely. And so getting off of the opiates, finding naturalized approaches that helped. Let's talk a little bit about how that pushed you to help support cannabis and hemp legislation.
Great, great subject. One of my favorites. Um, so this gets into all the people that I met. Dr. Robert Melamede, Dr. Meshulam, Dr. Donald Abrams, and then we can get into all the growers and all the caregivers and all these wonderful people that are part of this community. And a lot of them taught me not just the benefits for my own physical healing, but also the science and research behind why all this is working the way it does. One thing that I'll say is this discovery process was really a lot of learning and failing. But these days, because of where we're at with the community in general, is a lot of people can actually benefit from all of our failures and stumbling blocks, if you will. So I encourage all of you guys to listen to patients talk about their experiences. And the reason I want to bring this up is that we go to doctors and ask them for their opinions, but a lot of doctors actually don't know much about anything outside of their scope, not just cannabis, but we'll bring up nutrition, for example. And so sometimes you might want to just do a little research yourself and find what you might discover in your own process of learning. And this is where I really started to benefit, because once I started to look outside the box, I started to discover a whole slew of other things that were beneficial to my healing process.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. I think we all need to look outside the box. And again, the allopathic model, unfortunately, after working in it and seeing it for what it is, it's designed to put a band-aid on the problem. It's not designed to treat the root cause of the
Right,
symptom. So
right.
we have to
This
be
that's a
acknowledging
big one.
that. Yeah, exactly. So How did this lead you into working with the legislation? I know people are excited to hear about that because it's such a big topic right now with all the craziness with the hemp farm bill being under
Yes,
attack
yes.
essentially right now with the government shutdown stuff. So I'd love to hear about that if you want to share.
So I don't really have anything to hide. This whole process has been filled with bad stories, but just like with breaking my back, I actually look back at that and I think it's actually a good story. It's why I'm here today. It's why I have this information and why I feel obligated to help other people. Basically, in 2008, I got raided by law enforcement in Boulder, Colorado. They found over 2 pounds, 2 ounces of cannabis, cured cannabis product in my house because, as I was saying, I was using it for my pain and also making oils, and 36 plants I was also growing. And so I was prosecuted. Basically, I chose to ignore all the plea bargains and went to trial 14 months later. And so I was one of the first people to win a cannabis trial and get my box returned to me in front of the courthouse or in the courtroom, and I carried it out of the courthouse. There's some photos of that in some newspapers from back in the day, and that changed my life. I mean, not only was it really a eye opener in terms of the possibility of winning a court case for cannabis, but also the next day, I was basically dismissed from my teaching position in Denver. And that was rough. That really threw me sideways. But at the same time, it threw me into this spotlight, as you're alluding to, Julie, is that I ended up publishing a cannabis health news magazine and becoming known for that. And then, long story short, I ended up meeting Representative Wes McKinley in front of the Denver Capitol. And this was 2011 during Occupy, when the Occupy protests were going on. And I was curious. Occupy was filled with all sorts of different, protest issues. Some people were talking about one thing and other issues. And so it was kind of like a mixing pot of protest topics. And I ended up pitching my tent in front of the Capitol that night. And Representative Wes McKinley brought his cowboy teepee out and pitched it next to us. And we ended up talking about hemp that night.
That's so
Woke
cool.
up the next morning, he was gone. I was like, oh, that was a great conversation. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call. He says, hey, Jason, come into my office. I want to talk to you about something. So I was like, cool. I got a politician asking me to come and meet him at his office in the Capitol. We ended up writing the first hemp legislation for 2012 in about 45 minutes. And that bill, that legislation passed unanimously through all the committee hearings, the floor, House hearing. I think the Senate hearing, there was one person who voted against it, and he was actually a good friend of mine, or still is. And he voted against it because he said that the proposal was too limited, too controlled. And I actually agreed with him. And in other words, what he was trying to say is that we shouldn't have any laws. And this is coming to what you're bringing up is happening today. So we have this situation where, we have a definition of hemp in the 2018 Farm Bill. But if you look at that definition, it's nonsense. It has nothing to do with the botanical definition of the plant. There's no science in there. The number that they use for the 0.3% THC limit is arbitrary. In fact, if we start getting into science, I would argue that we need to look carefully and recognize that THC is not made by cannabis. Cannabis makes THC acid, which is not psychoactive, and you need non-enzymatic decarboxylation, which is a complex way of saying I need to light a match and smoke a joint or bake a cookie in the oven to add heat to remove that carboxyl component of THCA to make it THC. So that's another sticking point for me legally. We really need to pay attention to using true science and true definitions. And this is something I think we just went through over the last 5 years. If we start changing definitions, we have no way of communicating. And so I would argue that hemp definition in the 2018 Farm Bill is actually causing a lot of the problems we have today. And So just to kind of wrap that up, I think that all the legislation we've seen since, including the stuff I worked on in 2012 and 13, is all problematic. And that is because the foundation of everything we're all involved in is built on fraud and manipulation. And that you can go back to the congressional hearings around the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. You can look at 1969 when Timothy Leary won his Fifth Amendment court case proving that the Marijuana Tax Act was unconstitutional. I'm full of information, so I can go down these lists and lists and lists pointing out all the fallacies of what we're living under. But basically that in a nutshell is where we are today. And so I'm actually, in a weird way, I'm thankful that this hemp issue has come up right now in regards to the conversation about what is what, right? Who has jurisdiction and so on and so forth. What is synthetic? What is natural?
No,
Because
and
it
that's a
looks
great
like
point.
people are coming back together again.
I agree. I agree. And I think you voiced that perfectly. And again, I never understood that, right? We did a lot of work in Tennessee and, they were only looking at D9. And I'm like, so you're going to allow all the flower with THCA so that it's non-psychoactive in its raw form. But as soon as you decarboxylate it, again, to your point, when you use a lighter, you put it in the oven, you put it, past that decarb point, it becomes then psychoactive. So, again, I think a lot of these rules, regulations, they were based upon, you know, non-scientific evidence that really didn't fit either both the cannabis or the hemp plant because it wasn't conducive because they weren't looking for the correct things. So, no, I appreciate you saying that. And, that kind of leads me to my next thought. After doing some legislation and assisting with that in 2011, you've furthered, some of that work. You were working with Joseph Talley, right? Correct on that?
So Joseph Tully is a federal attorney, and he's working with the Deschedule Earth Project. And that's actually a really good point to bring up because I think he just submitted an approach which would look at equal protection under the law in regards to cannabis. So, I need to read exactly what he wrote, but from the conversations we have or have had, I think what he's doing there is approaching this from the perspective of if people can do an extraction of oregano oil, for example, why can't they do an extraction of cannabis oil? And we need to look at equal protection under the law in that case. And maybe that's not going to be the context of what he uses as an example, but I think that gives you a rough idea of the thinking behind that. And so we're really excited to have him supporting the project as well. And there's a whole bunch of people part of that. We're not really a group. It's kind of like we're made up of a bunch of individual people who really believe that we have an obligation to do the right thing. Yeah.
Well, and I couldn't agree more on that sentiment either. I think we have a big problem as a society when we make nature illegal. It's our ancestors have been using these compounds for thousands of years safely, and then we take them away. There's a big disconnect with humanity and nature again, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the illnesses arise within our time.
And on that note, this is also why I believe that we're seeing in the media right now all this fear about cannabis. So, for example, scromiting. So there's this fear information coming out saying that if some people who use cannabis go into these vomiting fits. Now, I have seen these things in recent times, and I was just living in Mexico for quite a few years, and I have a whole story about that in terms of my experience with cannabis and what I saw down there. But what I think is happening is because we didn't see scromiting, whatever this is. This
Right.
comes back to vocabulary. Let's use real words. Scromiting is like this cartoon language. So if people are actually getting nauseous and throwing up because of cannabis, that's a serious issue. However, if we look back in history, this is something that didn't really exist until recently. So I think we need to look
Exactly.
deeper and start asking questions about what is it that people are getting exposed to. Are the plants being manipulated by mRNA sequences? Are they being genetically modified? Are people putting additives on the plant that shouldn't be on there? I mean, there's a whole slew of questions I have about this at this point. And that's my biggest concern, because for me, when I go back and look at my entire experience within this arena, I think this is intentional. And I said this 15 years ago. What I see with what I've had experiences with, like with writing the first legislation in 2012, we had somebody from the hemp industry come and meet us at the Capitol and try to put a paragraph in there that would have forced us to buy certified hemp seed from Canada. Now that's not okay.
No.
And so that got me to raise questions about who is actually involved in all of this. Who are these associations? Who are these activists? Who are these politicians and celebrities like Montel Williams and so on and so forth, so-called supporting the plants? Because I think in some way we can call it some sort of controlled opposition. And I don't mean to
Yeah,
be
I mean,
paranoid in saying that, but if you look at everything else in our world today, it's what we're facing.
it's a scary thing, and to your point, we don't know as a society how the plant is going to be affected when it's radiated. We don't know about
Oh gosh.
the sprays that they're approving from the government. We don't know how that's going to impact the body. So, to your point, I think it's a really big concern. We've had thousands of years of safety from consumption
Yeah.
of this plant. And in fact, it was prescribed originally for medical patients for nausea during chemotherapy and stuff like that. So something's not adding up. It doesn't add up for the science and for the safety protocol that we know of, and that has been, a elongated approach for thousands of years. Something isn't adding up. So I think, to your point, there's a lot of things that need to be looked at further. And
Yeah.
again, to further your point, we need to look at who's doing these articles, who's pushing them, who's pushing
Yes.
the research behind this. Follow the money. It's always about following the money a
Yes.
lot of times. So it's a scary thing. No, I appreciate you saying that, because it's something that needs to be approached. I saw that article a few weeks ago, and it's been bombarding on every platform about scrometing, and it's just weird. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And talking about Joseph and some of his work, that kind of leads us into discussing some of these projects that you've been a part of. If you feel comfortable, can we talk a little bit about, Project Deschedule Earth, and then your Food First initiative? I think those are beautiful projects that can be discussed here.
Thanks for bringing those up, because the research is a big part of this. And first, let me address just that word or that reference. A lot of times we look at research and think that it's actually a good source of information. Fortunately for myself, I've had so much experience with reading so many documents that I've gotten to the point where I can spot where there are holes or problems. And then the other side of it to think about is that a lot of research is done for economic profit, so motivation. So that is really important to consider. And then the other side of the question is what hasn't been researched. And so, for example, how do we know that THC comes from cannabis if there hasn't been any research to explore, are there any other plants in the world that actually can produce THCA or THC? And so that's just sort of a way to think about things. What hasn't been done can also be used to hide things. Now, the research stuff is really important. And so Deschedule Earth is basically, the intent there is to remove cannabis from scheduling. So scheduling is basically under the DEA's purview, and scheduling involves 1 through 5, right? I think if I remember right. And Schedule 1 is basically there's no use for a plant or a substance and it's harmful. Well, we know cannabis has medical use and we know it's not harmful. And so it shouldn't be in Schedule 1. And then there's talk about putting it in Schedule 3. Now, Schedule 3, if you look at it and look at what's in there, we have to consider that all those things you need to have a prescription for. So if they put cannabis in there and you don't have a prescription, what happens? Okay, so these are questions that need to be answered. The other piece in terms of research is, what are we actually dealing with, right? So once removed from descheduling, I think we're at a place where we can start fresh again. We're at the foundation again. So let's get rid of all the controls and start over again with real science and real information. And what I mean to address there is that we have to be cautious about the apparatus that are being used. So HPLC, GCMS, LC, these are all testing machines for determining if there's THC in a plant, for example. But we have to ask, is there heat being introduced into those systems? Because then they're changing the THCA to THC. Now, this gets into a whole bunch of other issues because there's also this term being thrown around regarding total THC. Now, I've never seen that in normal science. I've never seen a scientist just group together a whole bunch of different molecules and call it the same thing, right? And that's essentially what they're trying to do with this total THC reference. They're trying to put THCA together with THC and all the other different cannabinoids into one naming convention, which is illogical. It's non-science, right? The other thing is the testing. So we see hemp seeds and hemp leaves now are being used in consumable products, like with Chris Boucher and Justiva. But we don't really see any research about the nutritional value of the flower. And so the Food First initiative, which is again another project, and this was actually started by William Henry, is we're trying to get a real test, a scientific laboratory test to determine what is the nutritional value of the flower itself. Now, I already have my own understanding of all of this. I'm not going to say it out loud right now because I want the test to come out. But when we get that information, that's going to give us a whole lot more data to really emphasize how important this plant is to our nutritional intake and our health and well-being. And it's not just the minerals and the vitamins and the proteins and all of that, but the cannabinoids themselves actually interact with our nutritional system. And so we need to really understand what this is before we start banning anything. I personally think we're trying, or not us, but the system is trying to ban something that is actually key in our health and well-being. And if you look at our country prior to this being made illegal, we had hemp fields all over the place. We had pheasants in those hemp fields. We had a whole environmental ecosystem that existed with our hemp infrastructure, which has been wiped out. And so all these pieces are critical. So the Deschedule Earth one, remove cannabis from scheduling, and the Food First is to get the test to determine what the full nutritional profile is of the plant. Those are two big
I think
ones.
that's so important because, again, our ancestors have consumed these, they've applied them topically, they've eaten them, they've smoked them for thousands of years. And now all of a sudden, the 19th century, we have, prohibition. And now we have an abundance of different illnesses that are developing, et cetera. It's concerning. It's deeply concerning. We know that we have an endocannabinoid system to process these particular components of the plant. So now we have a disconnect with these plants. And now all of a sudden people are getting digestive issues, sick, you just a slew of different ailments that develop. So it's deeply concerning, and the research is needed because, again, we talk about the science. We know how our bodies process and work. Just to have that data from a scientific perspective, it just creates such clarity for what we, industry leaders have known for years. So that's important work. I really appreciate you guys doing that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but one thing I will say is that we need to be really cautious also about research. We can't let research be a limiting factor. Research should be treated as a benefit, right? To open doors, not to shut them. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the perception from the public is, oh, we need to do more research on cannabis. Well, I don't think we really do, unless it's specific to a specific private company's interests. I see no reason to delay anything anymore for more government research.
And when I say
that gets
research,
into a whole bunch of other issues.
And just to clarify, when I say research could be anecdotal research too. It could be patient feedback.
Yes.
Hey, I've been using this plant, and guess what? I don't have this ailment anymore. So again, I think from a perspective of safety and just scientific knowledge, they have to consider anecdotal research because it's applied research in its full capacity.
I'll give you actually a hardcore example about that. And this is outside of cannabis, but so parasites are also finally becoming a conversation in people's health. And what I want to address there is that when you go to a medical doctor, they're going to do a blood sample or a stool sample to determine if you have parasites. And if those come back negative, most medical doctors are going to say, you don't have parasites. The issue there, from what I've learned in Chiapas with the Mayan medicine people, is that those parasites can actually hide, if you will. They're not intentionally thinking they're hiding, but they can end up in your pancreas and other parts of your body where they don't show up in those tests. And so these are things that can only show up or reveal themselves based on side effects, right? So there's a whole slew of things that parasites can cause that you can look for in a person's behavior, eating habits, and so on and so forth, to also assist in determining if somebody has parasites. So yes, that anecdotal data is critical, actually.
I agree. And I think that sometimes weighs more than some of the, professionalized research, because again, we don't know where it's coming from or who's paying for it and what they're trying to show. So again, anecdotal and factual research components where you're seeing it live from a patient's perspective is crucial. And in regards to that, you bring up a great point. You do some consulting work, not only in the hemp and cannabis industry, but in the wellness space as well. Can you talk to people a little bit about your consulting?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a healer. I don't do any of those things. Basically, I'm just sharing my own experiences. And I sit and have conversations or consults with people to talk about lifestyles, lifestyle existence, what we do, and lifestyle changes that could actually move us in a healthy, stronger, more connected way of life. And these are things that I've learned through my own experience, but also things that I have had other people teach me. So down in Chiapas, I was surrounded by all sorts of types of healers, whether it was from the ayahuasca, bufo, peyote, psilocybin perspective, or plant medicine, or osteopath, acupuncture, the list goes on and on and on. And so I fortunately was able to I guess fall into this place where people started coming to me saying, hey, you were walking with a cane last week and now you're walking without one, or now you have more energy, or what's going on with you? Right? And so people started asking me, and I started just sitting with them and sharing these conversations. So now I have basically 3 pieces that I use to teach people how to use the healer within. So I'm in Hawaii right now. I was just in Chiapas. A lot of these indigenous cultures that I've interacted with and learned from believe that we are the healer within. We don't need to go to a doctor. It doesn't come from outside. We learn from outside, but the actual change is within us. And this is something that I experienced on my own. So in my back healing process, I had to go outside of that belief system and really become a child again. I had to relearn what it is to live and what it is to be responsible, not only for myself, but people around me. And responsibility is the biggest, to me, if I were going to pick one word, that's the biggest word in our healing, because we have a responsibility to ourselves, to others. That to me is the biggest missing piece in all of our healing recipes. And so today, I have pretty much, I'll call it 100% success rate with all the people that have sat with me in their healing process. And I'll give you 1 or 2 examples. One of them, an older lady, 70s, she was going towards early onset dementia, basically losing all her memory, couldn't handle too much information. She was exhausted. Today, she's playing ping pong. She's traveling. She's getting all her memories back. She can climb We call these the Guadalupe stairs in San Cristobal. She could barely walk them once. Now she can do them 10 times. So that was evidence that this is working. Another person had a brain tumor. Basically, we got that to shrink and disappear. He did it on his own. I didn't do anything. I just shared my information. And so that's a little bit of insight. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more pieces. There's a visualization technique that I talk about. I also teach the basics of magnetism, and which relates to frequency. And so all these pieces, in my view, connect to what I call law of living. And the law of living concept is basically putting all the pieces that Western science has taken apart and putting them back together and letting nature guide us. That's essentially it.
That's a beautiful approach. And guess what? I think, again, humanity has survived for thousands of years without synthetics. I think the system is highly broken from working in it, seeing it for what it is. I think personally that the system should be, hey, let's exhaust all naturalized approaches first. And if all else fails, then we go to a synthetic pharmaceutical. So that's personally my opinion. But it's been crazy, right? So we're coming along to the 40-minute mark. We have 5 minutes left of our segment. And it's been an honor and a privilege to host you. And I'm sure everybody that's listening and watching the segment today, they want to know how they can get in contact with you, how they can support your initiatives, and maybe do some consulting. So how can people get in contact and reach you?
So I see on the screen, you guys have posted my contact info. Thank you very much for putting it up there. I'm known as Mr. Hemp in the United States. I'm known as Don Cáñamo, which is Senor or Mr. Hemp down in Latin America. My email address is jasonlauve, Lauv as in Victor E.com, my full name. And then my website is my last name, lauve.com. And hempcleans.com. So Hemp Cleans is something I started years and years ago for remediating soil, water, and air, our bodies and mind. And so we know the plant is useful there. One thing I do want to share with you guys is just another side note. Is, as I've mentioned, I've been in many countries doing this as well. And I'll give you one hardcore example. So I was in Mexico and I achieved what's called an amparo. An amparo means protection. And basically what that means is that I have protection to do whatever I want with cannabis, except for commercial use. That's a separate issue. But there's no limits. I can transform, grow, produce, use, whatever. And so my question is, if I was able to achieve that in Mexico, don't I have more freedom than we have in the United States? Let's fight for the freedom we own in the United States. This is ours, right? And what I mean by fight is right. Okay, use our voice and words and contact your representatives. It does make a difference. Our government was set up for us to participate with. And so if you're complaining about the government, you have a choice to make it better. We can do this.
Absolutely. Jason, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege. You guys, please contact your representatives. We all, as a democracy, our voices matter. So Jason, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, especially while traveling. Mahalo. And Tyler, we wish you lots of love and healing. And thank you for connecting Jason and I, and lots of love to everyone. And Jason, thank you again for being a guest today. We appreciate everything.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Lots of love to everyone. Be kind, be compassionate to each other out there, and tune in another 4 weeks for another beautiful episode of The Holistic Alternative on USA Global TV and radio. Thank you guys. Have a beautiful rest of the week. Take care.
Listen, babe, now. 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 Listen, babe, now.
In a noisy world, true connection begins with listening. Elevated listening transforms every conversation in just 5 simple steps. Pause and breathe. Set your intention. Listen with curiosity. Reflect back. Agree on one next step. Join the Listening Mentor on Let's Finally Talk with Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the Listening Mentor, where we help you find inner peace, one conversation at a time. Streaming every day, Let's Finally Talk TV show with Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, only here on USA, Global TV and Radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channels to watch and engage with all our content.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honored to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Music by Johnny Dies. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative Direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Copyright 2025. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.